The moment our plane touched down in the Bahamas, my heart felt like it was glowing. I had dreamed of this honeymoon for months, golden sunsets, holding hands on the sand, sharing secrets under the stars. I kept picturing James and me laughing, carefree, just the two of us against the backdrop of paradise. It felt like stepping into the life I'd always imagined. As we walked off the plane, I squeezed James's hand and couldn't stop smiling. I can't believe we're finally here. Just you, me, and paradise, I said, my voice bubbling over with excitement. He gave me a quick smile but avoided my eyes. Yeah, it's going to be great, he muttered. I told myself not to overthink it, letting the turquoise horizon sweep away the doubt that briefly brushed against me. That first day was everything I had hoped for. We strolled along the shoreline, the warm sand slipping between our toes, the salty air filling my lungs with promise. I carried my heart wide open, convinced this was the beginning of our forever. What I didn't realize then was how quickly those dreams could start to crack, even in a place that looked like heaven. That evening, I couldn't stop staring at the view from our balcony. The ocean shimmered like it was dusted with diamonds, the waves singing their lullaby as the sky melted into pink and gold. I thought to myself, this is exactly how a honeymoon should feel. James sat beside me, but his mind seemed far away, his fingers tapping absently on the armrest instead of intertwining with mine. I tried to laugh it off, telling him stories from my childhood, little pieces of myself I wanted to share. He smiled, but it was quick, almost rehearsed, and I caught that flicker in his eyes again, like he was already somewhere else. I brushed it aside. Maybe he was just tired from the flight, I told myself. After all, we had the whole week to reconnect, to be wrapped up in nothing but each other. Still, when I laid my head on the pillow that night, something felt off. The sound of the waves should have lulled me to sleep, but instead I found myself replaying his distracted smile, the way his gaze slid past mine. I told myself I was being silly, that every couple needed time to adjust, but deep down, a quiet unease was beginning to stir. The next morning, I woke up early, eager to start our first full day. I imagined us having breakfast by the water, laughing over 2 sweet pastries and planning what adventures we'd take. I slipped into a sundress, feeling the breeze kiss my skin, and turned to see James still in bed, scrolling through his phone with that blank expression. It wasn't the look of a man on his honeymoon. I leaned against the doorframe and teased, "Come on, sleepyhead, paradise is waiting." He looked up, gave me another one of those quick smiles, and said he'd join me in a bit. I kissed his cheek, hoping to spark the warmth I craved, but his attention drifted right back to the screen. I left the room trying to shake off the chill that had settled in my chest. As I sat by the ocean with my coffee, I reminded myself not to expect perfection. But wasn't a honeymoon supposed to be about being glued together, wrapped up in each other? I sipped slowly, watching the horizon, whispering a promise to myself. I would fight for those moments I had dreamed of. Little did I know, the real fight was only just beginning. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, but by the second day, the pattern started to take shape. James casually mentioned he was heading to the hotel bar to watch a game with some new friends he'd met. I blinked at him, a little caught off guard. New friends? Already? We had just arrived, and I thought I was supposed to be his world right now. I tried to keep my tone light, though my chest tightened. I thought honeymoons were about us. Why are you spending so much time away? I asked, searching his face for reassurance. His expression hardened, defensive, like I'd accused him of a crime. Come on, Anna. You don't even like sports. Why force yourself to do something you'll hate? His words cut sharper than he realized. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered, I don't want to hate it. I just want to be with you. He brushed me off with a shrug, already turning toward the door, already halfway gone. As the door clicked shut, the silence that filled the room felt heavier than any storm. That's when the seed of doubt began to root itself deep inside me. The next day, it was basketball. James laced up his sneakers with this forced enthusiasm, telling me he'd be gone for just a couple of hours. I sat on the edge of the bed, hugging my knees, wondering why all his plans seemed to exclude me. A honeymoon wasn't supposed to feel like this, me waiting while he ran off to do things he knew I'd never choose. When I asked, "Do you really want to spend our honeymoon on the court instead of with me?" he just laughed it off, like I was being dramatic. "Anna, you'll be bored out of your mind. Trust me, you'd hate it," he said, tossing his towel over his shoulder. The sting wasn't just in his words, but in the way he didn't even consider that maybe I just wanted to stand beside him, no matter what. I watched him leave, the door slamming harder than it should have. For the first time, I felt small in that room, like a guest in my own marriage. My suitcase sat in the corner, untouched since we'd arrived, and I stared at it, wondering if I had packed my dreams along with my dresses. Something inside me whispered that this wasn't temporary, that his distance meant more than he was letting on. That evening, I sat alone on the balcony, the sound of the waves mocking the silence between us. My wine glass was half full, but my heart felt empty. Honeymoons were supposed to be about closeness, about building the kind of memories you'd cherish forever. Instead, I was left wondering why I felt lonelier in paradise than I ever had back home. When James finally returned, sweaty and smiling, he barely looked at me before showering and crawling into bed. No questions about how I'd spent my evening, no gesture that said, "I missed you." I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling fan, realizing just how far apart we already were. He had built a world outside of me here, and I wasn't invited. Still, I clung to the hope that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, maybe he'd choose me. Maybe he'd remember why we were here. But deep down, my instincts were screaming, and I could feel it in my bones. The excuses were only the beginning, and the truth waiting beneath them was going to hurt far more than I wanted to believe. By the third morning, my patience had worn thin. James told me he was heading out to play golf at the resort. Golf. A sport he had never shown the slightest interest in back home. Something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. I smiled, nodded, and kissed his cheek, pretending to believe him. But the moment he left, I knew I wasn't staying behind this time. I slipped on my sandals and followed at a distance, my heart pounding so hard it almost drowned out the sound of the ocean. From behind the palms, I watched him pick up a club and lazily swing it once or twice, like a child faking interest in a toy. My chest tightened as I realized this wasn't about golf, this was about hiding. After a few minutes, he glanced around, dropped the club, and walked off toward the far side of the resort. I trailed him, every step heavy with dread, my body torn between stopping and demanding answers, or pressing forward to finally see the truth. And when I saw him slip quietly into a room that wasn't ours, my world tilted on its axis. I froze at the end of the hallway, my hands trembling as I clutched the strap of my bag. The door had closed behind him, leaving me staring at the brass number like it was a scar carved into my honeymoon. My stomach twisted, part of me praying I was wrong, that maybe he'd gone in for some innocent reason. But my heart already knew. Innocence had nothing to do with this. I pressed myself against the wall, listening for any sound from inside. The muffled hum of voices drifted through, followed by a laugh that didn't belong to me. I bit down hard on my lip to stop the tears from spilling over, fury and heartbreak battling for space in my chest. I whispered to myself, "So this is what my honeymoon really is. Lies." The words tasted like poison on my tongue. Every minute I stood there felt like an hour. My mind flashed through our vows, through every promise he had made, and I felt them crumble like sand between my fingers. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or the fact that he had chosen her over me on the very trip meant to celebrate us. My whole body trembled, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let him walk away from that room without facing me. I stood there, arms crossed tight over my chest, my pulse racing so fast it echoed in my ears. Every second stretched out unbearably, like the universe was testing how much pain I could take before breaking. My knees felt weak, but anger steadied me, sharp, raw, and louder than my fear. I wasn't the same woman who had stepped off that plane days ago, glowing with dreams. That woman was gone. I thought about running, about sparing myself the sight of his guilty face, but another part of me, stronger and colder, whispered that he needed to see me standing there. He needed to know I had caught him. And more than that, he needed to feel the weight of what he had just destroyed. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about reclaiming myself. The sound of the door handle rattling snapped me out of my thoughts. I straightened, every muscle coiled like a spring, ready for the confrontation I knew was seconds away. The door opened, and as James stepped out, adjusting his shirt, I locked eyes with him. My silence said everything, and his startled expression told me he knew. His lies had finally run out of room. The moment the door clicked open, I felt the fire in my veins ignite. James froze when he saw me, his eyes wide, his shirt half tucked like a boy caught sneaking in after curfew. I didn't give him the chance to speak first. "How was your golf game, James?" I asked, my voice cold enough to cut through the humid air between us. He stammered, his face draining of color. "Anna, I can explain..." But I raised my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. The anger that had been simmering inside me boiled over. "No, you can't explain away walking out of another woman's room on our honeymoon." My words hung in the hallway like a verdict. He reached for me, desperation etched into his trembling voice. "It didn't mean anything. Please, don't blow this out of proportion." I almost laughed at the audacity. My body shook, but it wasn't from weakness. It was rage, betrayal, heartbreak, all twisted together. He wanted me to minimize it, to swallow the pain as if it were nothing. But nothing had never felt this sharp. I shook my head slowly, each word leaving my lips like a blade. "You blew it the moment you chose her over me. Our marriage ends here, at this door." The hallway around us felt like it had shrunk to nothing, just the two of us standing in the wreckage of what was supposed to be forever. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't falter. James's eyes darted around, searching for some escape, some way to reel me back in. "Anna, please, we can fix this. It was a mistake, that's all. I don't want to lose you." His words cracked, but they only made me feel more distant. I could see the panic in him, but it was too late. The image of him slipping into that room was burned into my mind. I stepped closer, my arms crossed like armor. "You already lost me. Do you know what it feels like to be betrayed during the one trip meant to celebrate us? To be replaced in the very bed where vows should still echo?" His face crumpled, but I didn't soften. This was the moment I realized. I wasn't just confronting him. I was closing the chapter on us. For a split second, he looked like a stranger to me. The man I had married replaced by someone small, pathetic, and scrambling. His lips moved, forming excuses I no longer cared to hear. The hallway smelled faintly of her perfume drifting out from the room behind him, and it made my stomach churn. Every trace of her on him was proof enough that there was nothing left to salvage. I took a step back, holding my head high even as my heart ached. "You made your choice, James, and now I'm making mine." His face fell, his shoulders sagging under the weight of a truth he couldn't outrun. He reached out like he might touch me, but I pulled away, letting the space between us grow into a canyon that would never be crossed again. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of waves crashing in the distance. I turned on my heel, leaving him standing there in his crumpled shirt, the door to his betrayal yawning open behind him. And as I walked back to our suite, I already knew what I had to do next, and it wasn't begging him to stay. Back in our suite, I moved with a calmness that surprised even me. My hands didn't shake as I folded my dresses, my sandals, the swimsuit I had once picked out, thinking James would smile when he saw me in it. He hovered in the doorway, his voice cracking, pleading. "Anna, please think about this. We just got married." His desperation rang hollow, bouncing off walls already stripped of love. I looked at him, my eyes steady, my voice colder than the air conditioning humming above us. "Exactly. And you threw it away before it even began." I zipped my suitcase with finality, the sound louder than any of his excuses. His shoulders slumped, like he'd suddenly realized he was powerless to stop the inevitable. But still, he tried. "Do you know what's worse than being cheated on, James?" I asked, standing tall in front of him. He blinked at me, silent, waiting. "Being cheated on during the one trip that was supposed to celebrate us." His mouth opened, but no words came. I slid my suitcase handle up and walked past him without another glance. My revenge wasn't dramatic, it was simple. I was leaving him to face the ruins he had created, alone. I rolled my suitcase through the lobby, every click of the wheels on the marble floor echoing like a victory drum. James trailed behind me, still begging, still promising things I no longer wanted. Guests glanced our way, curious about the scene unfolding, but I didn't flinch. Let them see. Let the world witness what betrayal looks like when it unravels in paradise. At the front desk, I didn't hesitate. I asked for a transfer to another hotel, my voice steady, my smile polite. The receptionist glanced between us, clearly picking up on the tension, but I didn't care. This wasn't about embarrassment. This was about reclaiming my dignity. And in that moment, I realized the sweetest revenge wasn't a scream or a scene. It was leaving him behind. By the time I stepped into the taxi waiting outside, the humid air wrapped around me like a new beginning. James stood on the curb, his words drowned out by the slam of the car door. As the driver pulled away, I leaned back against the seat, letting the island lights blur past. My heart still ached, but underneath the pain was something stronger. Freedom, sharp and undeniable. The next morning, I sat at the airport with my boarding pass in hand, my suitcase at my side, and a silence that finally felt peaceful. For the first time since we'd arrived, I could breathe without the weight of his lies pressing against my chest. Watching couples around me laugh and hold hands no longer stung. If anything, it reminded me that I deserved better than a man who had treated our honeymoon like a cheap excuse. As I sipped my coffee, I whispered to myself, "The Bahamas gave me clarity. I'd rather fly home alone than live in his lies." Saying it out loud felt like breaking a curse, like cutting the last thread that tied me to him. My phone buzzed with his name lighting up the screen, but I turned it face down on the table. Whatever he had to say didn't matter anymore. When the gate opened for boarding, I rose, standing taller than I had in days. Each step toward the plane felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he could never touch again. I didn't look back, not once, because this wasn't an ending, not really. It was the first page of something new, something mine. Months later, I found myself at another airport, but this time the weight on my shoulders was gone. No wedding ring, no baggage with James, just my passport, a suitcase, and a guidebook for Greece. As I handed over my ticket, a smile stretched across my face, effortless and bright. This wasn't an escape anymore. It was a choice. A beginning. I texted my best friend before boarding, snapping a picture of the plane outside the window. This time, I'm traveling for me. No lies, no shadows, just freedom. Her reply came quickly, a string of heart emojis and "go live your best life," and I laughed, the sound real and unburdened. It felt good to be cheered on, to have someone rooting for me when the man who once vowed to never leave my side had failed so miserably. Sliding my phone back into my bag, I inhaled deeply, letting the scent of fresh coffee and jet fuel fill my lungs. For the first time in a long while, anticipation wasn't laced with fear. The horizon was wide open, and so was my heart. As I stepped onto the plane, I wasn't looking for anyone to complete me. I was enough. And that realization was the sweetest victory of all. In Greece, I wandered through ruins older than any promise James had ever made, their stones whispering stories of resilience and survival. I posted photos of sunsets melting into the Aegean Sea, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply because joy spilled out of me and begged to be shared. Each caption I wrote was lighter than the last, filled with gratitude, strength, and a kind of happiness that no one else could take credit for. Friends back home commented, surprised at how radiant I looked. Some even whispered about James, how word had spread that he'd been caught in the Bahamas, how the woman he betrayed me with had left him soon after. I didn't bother responding. His story no longer intersected with mine. His downfall wasn't my concern. My only focus was the life I was carving out for myself. Every morning, as I sipped coffee on some tiny balcony overlooking the sea, I felt a spark reignite inside me. It was the part of me that had once believed in romance, but now believed in something even stronger, my own worth. Losing him hadn't broken me, it had freed me, and every sunrise reminded me of that truth. On my last evening in Greece, I stood on the shore, watching the waves kiss the sand, the sky painted in colors too beautiful to name. For a moment, I thought back to the Bahamas, to the woman who had arrived full of dreams and left with a broken heart. She felt like a stranger now, someone I had shed along with my ring. What remained was stronger, sharper, and braver than I had ever known myself to be. As the wind tangled through my hair, I whispered softly, almost like a prayer. I thought my honeymoon was ruined, but really, it was just the beginning of my life, and losing him was the best souvenir I could ever take home. The words didn't sting. They felt like freedom itself, like closing a door and stepping into sunlight. When I boarded the plane home the next morning, I wasn't carrying bitterness. I was carrying memories of sunsets, laughter, and the proof that I could build a life filled with joy on my own terms. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something far more powerful: peace.